everyone, we're going to get started. This is Mona. I am recording today's conference so I can send out a link to the video in case you'd like to reference it at a later time. Today is day 2 of our 4-day series IMA for beginners, setting up new items in the new item grid. And I know we do have some people today that were not on yesterday, so I'm going to go through a few housekeeping things in the beginning. In the meantime, if you could go ahead and, oh, there's a random text on the screen, but if you could test out the chat feature now. So if you can hear me and you can see the presentation, go ahead and enter the following information in the chat screen. Your data sync provider, one world, open text, third party, don't know, or none. And what is your skill level with the new item grid? None, novice, intermediate, advanced. So an example would be one world intermediate or don't know novice. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to be right back with the screen. I'm just going to fix something. There we go. Okay, so if you could go ahead and do that, I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. So I want to go over some webinar etiquette. I do apologize for those that went through this yesterday, but I just want to make sure that I do cover this. Please put your phones on mute when you're not speaking. If you're listening to the audio directly from your computer instead of calling in, please be sure to mute your computer's microphone. It helps minimize all the background noise because we do have a lot of people logged in, which is great, but it has the potential for a lot of background noise, and I prefer not to mute everybody so that it's easier to allow for auditory questions during those times. You can access your computer's microphone options by going to Control Panel, Sound, and Recording tab. Please wait to audibly ask questions until designated times. You'll see this little blue bubbly graphic with the question mark, or I may, if during the demo section when we're actually in IMA, I'll just ask quite a bit. Keep questions on topic and minimal. Feel free to submit questions at any time via the chat. So I'm looking through here. It looks like we have some open text, one world, a lot of don't knows. From the submissions I'd gotten, it looked like there were quite a few existing vendors and people who had already been in the application, but now what I'm seeing from the chat is there's quite a few novices that are logged in, which is great. So we want to help you guys get started in the grid and be able to use it. So this gives me a good idea of your skill level. I would talk to maybe someone from your company and try to find out if you don't know if you use data sync, try to find out if you do for sure, because the process we're going over today is for those utilizing data sync because we do require it. So I would talk to someone from your company and find out who is your data sync provider, because you may need to interact with them if you're having trouble getting items synced over. Okay. So if I'm not able to answer your questions during the call, please email vendoruniversity@searshc.com. And if I missed your question, then I can respond to it, or if I wasn't able to answer it, I'll find out who can answer it. So I'm going to try to keep up with the chat, but this is kind of new to such a big webinar series with the chat and everything, so just give me some grace, but I'm going to try to cover everything for you guys. For those who weren't on yesterday, my name's Mona. I like to travel, I have 3 adorable nephews, and I have a cat and a blind dog named Tofu and Chloe. So that's a little bit about me since you're going to be hearing me over the next few days. Today we are covering setting up new items in the new item grid. Yesterday we covered some IMA basics and terminology. 2 call-outs I want to do. First off, I know yesterday there were a couple of people on who mentioned that they do manual item build. We do require a data sync provider for syncing over your items and using the new item grid, but there are a few exceptions. Most notably, if you are building specific types of cartons, mixed cartons, assorted cartons, pallets that are actually built in the system as pallets. If you remember from yesterday, you can build just a uniform carton or exploding assortment carton and put it on a pallet. But if it's being built in the system as a pallet, or a sellable carton. Those types of cartons cannot be synced over, and they do have to be manually built, but they are the exceptions. We don't have a lot of vendors that do that. If you do build items manually and you'd be interested in a webinar on manual item build, please email me at vendoruniversity@seershp.com. I kind of want to gauge interest to see if we have enough interest to start up a regular series, or if it should just be kind of a one-off situation. And it would probably just be one session, like once a month, that we would offer. So just let me know what you think. Also, I wanted to let you know about our SHC item build that we offer for vendors. These are meant to be more for vendors that don't build a lot of items on a regular basis. You maybe only do a handful of them a year, and you spend a long time away from doing it, and you come back to build your new items, and you kind of have to relearn everything all over again because it's been so long. So this might be an option for you. There's a link there as well as an email if that's something that you're interested in and you'd like to learn more about it. I will be sending out this PowerPoint presentation later today, so you'll be able to have easy access to that information. Today we're going to be covering really quickly IMA access and resources. The focus of today is going to be with the new item grid as well as the grid history, basically setting up items through that initial process and getting them operational in IMA. But real quick, I do want to cover this because we do have some vendors that may not be set up yet for IMA access. So to request IMA access, if you're in the vendor portal, you click on My Profile, scroll down and click IMA, and then select the box next to IMA Item Maintenance Application. And then you just verify the information and then click Save. Usually access is provided within 2 business days. Be aware if you're a brand new vendor and you've never synced items over, you do have to sync items over before you'll be given IMA access. To access IMA, you just go to the vendor portal. You can click IMA under Applications, or you can click it up in the menu bar at the top. And then on the left side is the Access Login, and you just click that to get into IMA. System requirements. There is one issue that our help desk gets a lot of calls about, more than any other issue. That issue would be your browser. So you do have to use Internet Explorer to access IMA. You may be able to get in with Chrome or Firefox, but eventually it's going to basically break on you and it's not going to load the information correctly, or it's going to start acting really quirky. So you do have to use Internet Explorer. More specifically, IMA was built for Internet Explorer 8. So if you use version 9, 10, or 11, you will need to set compatibility view. To see what version you use, you just go to About, and then, Help, and then About Internet Explorer. That'll let you know the version you use. If it's not 8, you need to go to Tools, Compatibility, View Settings. Under Add This Website, enter mykmart.com, click Add, and then Close. Now be aware, I know most of you are working on work computers. They get updates pushed out to them regularly from your company. I have heard from a lot of vendors that because it's pushed out, sometimes it'll delete their compatibility view settings, and they actually have to go back in and add it again. So I just wanted to call that out to you guys in case your browser is kind of acting. Set the compatibility view settings. So any questions so far on accessing or compatibility view? And if you can, if you're not speaking, could you please put your phones on mute? That would be great so that we don't get all the background noise. Thank you so much.
Excuse me. Are we doing something like online? Because I'm not getting it.
Have you logged into the webinar?
I thought I did, but it's not working.
Okay. Well, I am recording this, so if you're not able to get it up, I will be sure to send it out. Is anybody else having, is anybody else not seeing the presentation? What browser are you in?
Internet Explorer.
Okay. Yeah, that's the one that I use it. I have a separate computer up and I'm seeing it fine. Tamara says it's...
Oh, it's saying that I'm already connected and it's loading. So let's hope that works.
Okay, give it a few minutes. If it's still not working, maybe close out of Internet Explorer and try to reload it. Maybe there's something with the connection.
Okay.
But I am recording it, so I'll send it out for you. So, All right, moving on, we're going to quickly touch on IMA resources and help. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I do want you to know the resources that are available to you. Within IMA, if you click the resources button, there are several options. Some of these are more for internal users, because you do see the same things as internal users. So notable to vendors, you have the data synchronization link, vendor IMA documentation and training, quick solutions, and then there's a link to the IMA portal. And if you click Help Desk, then it'll display some more information, including the phone number for the Help Desk. If you click the Help button up at the top right, the one that's circled, that actually opens up the help file. So for data catalog vendors, I recommend clicking the topic Data Catalog Vendors, and all those topics underneath that main topic will be what's relevant to you. Because like I said, a lot of internal users do use this as well, and so it's not all relevant to you. Online, we do have some 24/7 training that's accessible. On the right side, there are some training videos. These videos are a bit older, and we are looking at seeing when we can get the resources to update them, but they might be good for you to review if you need a refresher on working with setting up new items. Also on the left, you have the Data Catalog Vendor Guide, and then this highlighted section, I'm going to go through a couple of these. If you're wanting to see the different fields that map to OneWorld, Sync, or OpenText, which is GXS, you can access those here. And then below that, you have these quick steps. These are documentations for maintenance. We're going to be going over all of these maintenance processes on Thursday. And then down here, the vendor IMA field responsibilities. We briefly went over that yesterday. They're basically the system required fields for vendors. So if you'd like to see that in a one-sheet job aid, it's on the bottom of the list. Finally, we do have intermediate IMA and Workbench on site. So this is actually in Hoffman Estates. If you come, you will actually be able to get into our training environment and work with items, get some hands-on training and experience. You can learn how to do mass changes. If you have some stuff in production that you're waiting to process, you can actually work those here, and we'll walk you through it. We also have a 2.5-hour session on Workbench that takes place in the afternoon. Stephanie from our training team teaches that, and she used to use Workbench on a daily basis because she used to be an inventory analyst. So she's very, very good at teaching it. But our next offering on that is October 25th.
Excuse me, how do you get access to Workbench? Because I don't have access to Workbench.
If you would like access to Workbench, you can email vendors@searishc.com.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And if you forget the email, you can always just email Vendor University, and I can give you the information that way as well.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
No problem. All right, so moving on to the main focus of today, which is processing new items through IMA and getting them operational so that we can order them. So before we get into it, I would like you to use the chat feature to respond. What's your biggest struggle with the new item grid? So it can be a specific step, or it could be a specific field that you have trouble populating. Just let me know, and I'm going to come back to those once we get to the demo section, okay? So what is the grid? It's basically a Flash-based spreadsheet that you use to complete information about your products. Those who are using Data Sync use the new item grid. You can't access it outside of the grid. And one of the really nice features about the grid is you can work up to 50 items at one time. Now if you're doing manual builds, you have to build them one by one. With the grid, you can do up to 50 items at a time. You can copy down a lot of fields so that you're not entering all of them individually. And that's one of the big advantages. So there's a lot of fields that can be synced over. We do require a few additional fields on the grid. This list here, this isn't a list of all additional fields that we require. This is a list of all additional fields that are available that are non-data catalog fields. And you can update these additional fields in the grid if you want to put more information than just what's required. Some of them are required, like brand and primary store format, projected first insert date, but these are a list of all the additional fields outside of data catalog. So real quick, we're going to go on a high-level overview using the PowerPoint presentation, and then we're actually going to go into IMA, and I'm going to walk you through setting up items. So the first thing you would do is hover over the data catalog and click New Items. One of the things I do want to call out, you'll see that 60-day inactivity note down at the bottom. If your items have been synced over and you just kind of leave them there and you don't touch them, after 60 days they will be deleted from your task list. You're not going to get like a heads-up email saying that they're getting ready to be deleted. They'll just be gone. So I just wanted to call that out to you. To prevent that from happening, all you have to do is just go in and do something with your items. Bring them up in your task list and put them on a grid. Or if they're already on a grid, change a field and then save your grid again. So you just have to do something, touch them, in order to get them, to keep them from being deleted. It'll load this page for you, at which point you enter criteria to search for your items, and then you click Get Task List. Now you can enter as much criteria as you would like to, but you have to enter at least one. And I do recommend maybe entering fewer fields, and then if you need more, you can enter more, unless you have a lot of items that are regularly in your task list. Because if you try to narrow your list too much, you might not get any results back. So I would recommend maybe starting out with your pay dones or your vendor stock number, and then you're trying to find just one specific UPC or G10, you could enter those in the UPC or G10, the shipping marking number field as well. So once you enter your details, you click Get Task List, and it's going to load your task list. Now you probably will not have anywhere near this amount of items in your task list. It's from our training environment, so there's a lot of items for this particular vendor. But let's say you do have quite a few. Let's say you have up to 100. And you get in and you realize there's too many items in here for you to sort through. You can further filter your list by at the bottom. There's these filters. And I think probably the most beneficial ones would be your vendor stock number, if you didn't select it in the previous page. There's also your load date. So let's say you synced over items from 2 weeks ago, and then you synced over items from yesterday. And now you've gone into IMA, and you want to work those items through that you synced over 2 weeks ago. You could actually select the load date from this filter down here. That way you're only looking at those specific items. So once you click Create Grid, it comes up to this page, and you have to enter information about your grid. So all of the information that you enter here is going to be applied to all items on your grid. So you select your division, in your order dones, in your category, and flow type. Now you can select your subcategory, but it's not required. And you can change it once you get into your grid. If you have multiple assortments on your grid, you can have more than one subcategory on a single grid. But otherwise, everything on your grid has to be from the same category, has to be the same flow type, the same division, and the same dones. So once you enter the information about your grid, you click Apply. And then you populate all required fields. They're going to be indicated by that red asterisk, and then you click Approve. Now, I do want to call out to make sure that you save your grid quite often. Not saving it, it'll come up with a message asking you if you want to save it. So if you walk away from your desk and 30 minutes passes and you didn't save your grid, you're going to lose all of the information that you just did in your grid. It's not going to save any of those changes. So be sure to save your grid frequently. So information about the grid displays at the top of the screen. So here you can see the grid type is in. There's different types of grids, and tomorrow you'll be exposed to some of the other types, but in stands for New Item Grid. Here you can see your SHC div cat. This is 24-1. You can see your flow type, your dones. Now, if you're working your grid and then you're kind of looking at this information and you realize that you put the wrong information on your grid, let's say it was supposed to be division 24, category 10, not 1, you can't change that within the grid. To change that, delete your grid by clicking Delete Grid, and it will return those items to your task list. Then you have to go back to your task list, bring those items into a new grid again, and that's where you can select the correct category or whatever other information may be incorrect. So another thing that's useful on this page is this lock icon. So when you have the lock icon on, it locks all of the fields from, I think, the description line 2 all the way over to the left. And when you scroll from left to right, fields to the right of description line 2 will move. This is great if you're working on a regular monitor that has a good screen resolution. If you're working on a laptop, which is what I'm going to be doing during the demo, you may find it more helpful to unlock that screen so that the entire screen moves over. If you don't have a very good screen resolution, you're just working on a laptop screen, it only leaves like a very small amount of space on the right side of the screen. So the selected view status displays in the corner. Real quick, I wanted to point out on here, after you've created your grid, this is your default view that you see. It brings all of the empty required fields into the default view. Now if you change that view, which on the top left you can see it says empty required. That's the view that this one is in. Now if you select all and you wanted to view every single field possible that you can edit, you'll notice that the view changes on the top left as well. Now if you click into any of those tabs, you'll be able to see what tab you're in. This is just helpful in case you kind of forget where you might be within your grid. Okay, so we're going to get ready to go into the new item grid demo. I'm taking a second to look at the chat. Jill says her biggest issue is only being able to do 50 items at a time. I think you have thousands of items, so only being able to do 50 at a time in a grid takes a lot of time. And I definitely understand that, but it is definitely an improvement from having to do them one by one. The downsides about doing more items in a grid, first off, is that it takes a lot longer to process your grid. It takes a lot longer to save your grid. And it actually slows this entire system down for everybody. So that's why it's important not to do items within your grid. And then I'm looking at Anna. What happens if you're receiving data catalog notifications saying you have 4 items in data catalog, but when going into IMA and performing a search, nothing shows up? So I know a lot of you will get emails whenever there are items in your task list. So Anna, whenever you go in, how are you searching for your items from that main screen? Let me see if I can get to it real quick. Okay, so from this screen, what type of information are you entering when you're searching for your items? I would recommend just entering your paid items and then clicking Get Task List and not entering any other information. Have you tried that?
Well, that's what I've done. It doesn't specifically say that it's new item task list. It just says data catalog notification. So I'll go to data catalog, go down to data catalog notifications, and search by the done. Being that I do both Sears and Kmart, I have separate done numbers for them. So I do a search on both, and nothing shows up.
Okay, so this is the data catalog notifications. We're going to be talking about the data catalog notifications feature tomorrow.
Okay.
So I'll take a look at this today as well, and if you could send me your DUNS number through email, I'll look specifically at your items to see if I can see anything on my end. And we'll take a closer look at this tomorrow during the IMA feature session. Is that okay?
Okay. Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Great questions, guys. So we're going to move on, and we are going to be I'm going to be walking you guys through IMA, and hopefully IMA will cooperate with me today. So I'm going to enter just the G10 of the item that I want to work right now, because I know exactly what I'm looking for, and otherwise the task list for the DUNS number I'm using is really large, and it will take a very long time to load. All right, so once you bring up your task list, you want to click this plus sign, and what that does, What that does is it lets you see exactly what is in that carton. So you want to verify that all of your UPCs for that carton have synced over. So in this example, we have, it's an apparel assortment, and there's a 2T, a 3T, and a 4T. Supposed to be a 5T that's synced over as well. If that's the case, I would say stop. Don't try to work these items through. Go back to your data sync operator and resync your items, because you need to get that additional each or that additional UPC showing up in your task list before you try to work them through. So once you've verified that all of your items are there, you can go ahead and select your carton. Now you don't have to select all of the eaches under your carton. You can just select the carton and you can click Create Grid. It'll bring any each within that carton into your grid. So here, normally these aren't populated. I was just in here an hour ago working, and so it remembered my information. But this is where you select your information about all of the items going onto your grid. So I selected that this is in Division 49. For my order DUNS, typically you guys will have a drop down for all of the DUNS that is associated with your ID. I actually am a super user, so I had to search for it. And then underneath that is your category. And this is your subcategory. I went ahead and selected that. And then your flow type. Now, many of you may have had the experience where you're supposed to set your item up a certain way, and when you go to select your flow type, it's actually not an option in the drop-down. That's not uncommon to happen, and there's a very specific reason for it. One, whenever you encounter that, first off, make sure that you selected the correct DUNS number. So when I search for this one, this vendor has multiple DUNS numbers, and I'm looking for right here, and it has ORD. Now this one's not a good example because they all have ORD, but you'll see them sometimes. They have PAY, pay, for pay DUNS, and ORD stands for order DUNS. Now if you select a DUNS with PAY, you're not going to get any flow types to display at all for you to select. Give me a second. Another thing is you may have some options for flow type, but not the option that you need to select. And in that instance, I would recommend that you talk to your merchant, make sure that that is actually the flow type they're wanting you to select. If it is, your merchant's going to have to put in a request to have that flow type added to your DUNS, because basically your DUNS is not set up for the flow that they're wanting if you're not seeing it in the drop-down. So we're going to select DC, and then you click Apply, and then it creates your grid. Now the more items you have, the longer this process takes. Sometimes it's not that long, like now. Sometimes it seems like it takes a while. It depends on how busy the system is at the time and how many items you're trying to put on there. So you do have you have the default view open, which is all of the empty required fields. And you can scroll over to the left and you can see that there's quite a few of them. But just start going through with your first one. Say we're going to do brand. So you just start typing it in, and it'll bring up all the brands that match. And you can click Apply, and it applies it. Now if you do it on an each, you can click Copy Down, and it's going to copy down to all of the eaches in your grid, which is a great time-saving feature. You cannot copy down from a carton to an each, but if you had more than one assortment on this grid, so let's say you have this carton number 1, and these are the eaches in it, and then carton number 2 eaches. If you copy down, it's going to copy down all the way to the eaches on the second carton as well. Then next we have weight, and a lot of vendors, their default response to this is they just want to add this up, so they would enter 3. And that's not actually right, because this assortment has 6 eaches. So if you're not sure how many eaches are in your assortment, you can go to the Package tab, and you can look at your member quantity. So here I can see there's 2 of each of the UPCs. So I'm going to go back to MC required, and I lost my weight field. Let me go back to packages. Sometimes you'll see that the fields can kind of shift if you go from tab to tab, but it does remove a lot of fields because I had an answer there. So if you move away from empty required and then you go back to it, it typically removes a lot of the fields that you've completed up to that point, so that it kind of narrows your list down for you on what's left to be done. So that's why it removed weight from my empty required view. So since there's 6 eaches in this carton, each weighs 1 pound, that means this is going to be 6, not 3. So that's a really common mistake that I see vendors make. So let's go ahead and go back to empty required fields and let's move on to country of origin. Real quick, one of the call-outs I wanted to make, when you're setting up your items, you may not see the screen exactly like I'm seeing it. You may have additional fields, you may have less fields. It depends on the fields that you think over. And real quick, I'm looking at Jill's question in the chat. She says, when I use the copy down feature, they each is copy down but never the cases. Do you know why this feature won't be working for me? I don't know if you did that before I had said it already or not. Never copies down from the cartons to the eaches. So it just doesn't work that way because a lot of fields aren't required for cartons, even though I know there's some that are there for both cartons and eaches. But it just never copies down from the cartons to the eaches. It wasn't designed that way.
But didn't you say you can copy down from carton to carton?
No.
Oh, I thought you said you could copy your cartons to your cartons and your eaches to your eaches.
Oh, no. I'm sorry if it came across that way. That wasn't what I intended. What I was saying was, if you have, let's say we have this carton here, carton number 1, and the eaches, and you have carton number 2 and the eaches. If you copy down the eaches, it'll skip over that carton and continue copying down to the following eaches. Basically, just because there's a carton there doesn't mean that your eaches are going to stop copying down. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, that's what happens for me. I just thought you'd said if you copy the case, it'll copy down for each of your cases and skip the eaches.
No, I'm sorry for the confusion on that.
Thank you.
Okay, so with country of origin, if you remember yesterday I spoke about how important it is to make sure that this is correct, especially if you're saying that it's made in the U.S. Because there's a lot of people who only want to purchase items made in the U.S. So if that's what you're putting, you want to make sure that that's actually accurate. You can put more than one country. I know I've had some vendors where part of their product is made in one country and part of it's made in another. So you can put however many countries you need to for this to be accurate, and then click copy down. HTS codes, if you remember yesterday, it's basically populates a list for the driver when he picks up your items. And so if he, for instance, gets stopped while he's driving, he gets pulled over by the police, they might ask him to produce a list of what is in his truck. And that list gets populated from the HTS codes that are populated here in IMA. So you can enter in a description and click search. It'll update this drop-down field to only display results that match that. And sometimes it can be hard to find an exact match, so just find the closest one and click Add. For fabric metal content, these are in alphabetical order. So you can just go down, we'll do cotton, do polyester. Now with, I forgot to hit Add with cotton. Make sure you click Add or it's not going to go. Let's go back and find cotton. Now with fabric and metal, you do have to enter a percentage. It has to add up to 100. So I just exited out of it. You could just enter 100 if it's just one fabric. Sorry, my computer's acting a little odd. There we go. Perfect. Okay. And then you click copy down, and it'll copy it all the way down. So if it's just one, you would have to enter 100 because it has to total to 100%. After fabric metal content, we have some hazardous questions. And to see all, like the question in its entirety, you can just hover over the question in the header. And this is asking if the product or accessories contain any of the following. And it gives a big list but there is a few exceptions: apparel, appliances, electronics, footwear, tools, and other articles. So we're going to select no for this and drop that down. The next question is asking if it contains PVC, and then the question after that is asking if the packaging contains PVC. So since this is apparel, I would think that it wouldn't, so we're going to select no. And then the next question is hazardous storage code. Now, if you do not know the answer to this, please check with someone at your company. This is very important that it's selected correctly. For apparel, we're going to select no hazardous, but some of the other options would be aerosols, flammable liquids, oils, oxidizing chemicals. They even have a selection for pet foods and food products or consumables. But we did have an instance where this was not answered correctly, and a customer ordered a product online, and this product was on a plane. And the product was a type of propane gas for camping. And it actually started a fire on the plane. It was definitely not a great situation. They were able to contain it pretty quickly. The plane didn't go down or anything like that, obviously, but it was a pretty big deal. So it's very, very important that answer is answered correctly. Next, you have your cost. So this should just be whatever cost you have agreed upon with your buyer. And you do have to enter the cost for the carton, but a little trick. If you enter it here first under member cost, it will automatically populate the cost for the carton for you. So you can just copy that over. So after that, we have the primary store format. So most of you will probably be Sears or Kmart. There are a few other options here that you can scroll through. There's a huge number of options actually. But we're going to select Kmart for today. And the next one is ship off from. These are your ship points. So basically, where are we going to be picking up your item from? So that's what you let us know from the ship off from. Now, some of you may have the instance where you might want to use more than one ship point. Let's say we plan on stocking your item in a DC in California, and we plan on stocking your item in a DC in, let's say, Pennsylvania. And you have your item available at all of your warehouses. So instead of having us just pick it up from one single warehouse and shipping it out to California and to Pennsylvania, you might have us pick up from a warehouse in the West Coast for the California DC, and you might have us pick up from a warehouse on the East Coast for the Pennsylvania DC. So if that's the instance, or that's the sort of setup that you want to do, you initially just have to set it up with one ship point and approve it through. And then after the item becomes operational, you can actually do a change request so that you can get different ship points for different DCs. So I'm going to go ahead and save it, and while I'm saving this, I'm going to check up on the chat. So Yvonne's asking, so there's no difference between the member cost and cost. No, there shouldn't be any difference between the member cost and cost in pretty much all situations that I'm aware of. So if you're just doing a standard setup, just keep them the same, and that'll be how it should be. And if you have any questions, you can always email imahelp@searshc.com, but those are typically always the same. I'm sure there's an exception somewhere, but they're typically always the same. And then Jill is asking, we ship from multiple ship points, but this field is not an option on my grid. Who do I need to talk to get this activated? Okay, so do you see the ship off from field at all on your grid?
No, it's not.
Okay. Have you gone and looked at the vendor pack tab?
Yes, because I fill in, hold on. I thought so, but maybe not. That's where it's at.
Yeah, so
it's not required. I do have that option on mine.
They have been synced over. I'm not sure if that's a field that syncs over or not, but at some point somehow it got the information if it's not showing up under empty required.
Well, see, that's what I'm having a problem with my buyers. They're like having to write POs on separate days to get them to go on different purchase orders for when they're on different ship points. So we've been trying to figure this out.
Yeah. No, I understand. So if you need different ship points for the same item, like so if you need different ship points for different DCs, when you do the initial setup, you just have to have one ship point set up on it, and you have to approve it with just one ship point. And then after it's operational, you can do a change request, and you can go in and actually change it for specific DCs rather than the entire item. On Thursday, we're going to be going over that process actually in the IMA maintenance session, and I'm going to be doing a demo showing how to do that on Thursday.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so now that my grid is saved, and just as a reminder, be sure to save your grid frequently so that you don't lose your work if you happen to walk away from your computer. The next field we have, well, first off, I came back to empty required, and you'll note that a lot of those fields that I'd already completed disappeared. So it does keep updating this default view whenever you come back to it, so that way you know more what you need to focus on. All right, so our next one is vendor applied EAS tags. So we're going to choose no. For those of you that weren't there yesterday, the EAS tag is basically that security tag. Let's say with clothing, some stores will have a security tag on clothing, or if you have a more expensive product like some sort of tool or like a drill, there might be a security tag on that product as well. So that's the EAS tag. Next, you have to select the projected first insert date. So this doesn't have to be exact, but it's basically when they're planning to get your product into the stores. And after that, we have our California Prop 65 questions. So again, just like with the hazardous questions, you can just hover over that question header, and you can see the question more in full as well as the answer. Asking if your item requires a California Prop 65 warning. We're going to say tested does not contain any California Prop 65 chemicals. So again, for those that weren't here yesterday, California Prop 65, and most of you should be familiar with it. I do get some vendors occasionally who aren't. Basically, the state of California has some stricter regulations than most of the rest of the country, so they want to know if certain chemicals are in your products and whether or not it requires a warning label. Because question number 2 is asking if there's a warning label on the package. So we selected no. And then the final field, if you remember, I said the EAS tag field. It's on the vendor pack tab, and it's also on the item tab. So that's why you're seeing it twice here. But they just need to coordinate together and match. So we're going to say no again. So once you've completed all of the fields on your grid and everything has been filled in, you click Approve. And it's going to take you to this grid history page. Now you can stay here and wait if you want to. You can go in and work other items, or you can exit out of IMA completely and come back the next day. So we are going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation real quick and look at grid history. And sorry, one second, I just realized there's another question. Gwen's asking, how does Kmart use the projected in-store date? It is tough for us to predict what this is, so wondering how accurate this needs to be. It doesn't need to be super accurate. It's kind of more of a for your information and kind of a way to help people prioritize what's in their task list, because as it progresses through to the other roles, they can see on that main task list page the projected first insert date. So several years ago, I used to set up items in the merchant role, and I could go into the areas that I covered and look at the task list to determine to see the projected first insert dates. And if I had insert dates that were like within the next week, I knew that, hey, these items really need to be processed. I need to talk to the buyer and get the information on this so I can get this process through. So it's really kind of more for prioritization. And if it's incorrect, the merchant can actually update this. This is a field that they're actually supposed to update if it needs to be updated. So you don't need to spend too much time trying to make sure that your projected first in-store date is correct. Okay, so we're going to look at grid history. So like I said, you can go away from that screen and come back the next day or the next week, and you can look at your grid history. So to do that, you just click grid history from the data catalog menu, and then you enter search criteria and click search. Now I recommend personally start off by just entering your user ID. If you enter your user ID, in the search results you will see everything that's associated with your ID, everything that you have touched. And that's usually sufficient for what you need, and I doubt that there's going to be like 100 grids in there that haven't been processed that you're going to have to sort through. If you do need to use any of this other information in the search for your grid, like say you only want to look at new grids, items, you could change the grid type. Or if you only want to look at them for a specific order done, you could select that here, and so forth. So this is kind of what it looks like if you have anything in your history. It has these icons and the status description here on the left. So if it's queued, that means that you've approved it and it's waiting to process. If it's processing, that means that it's kind of thinking, it's checking for errors, and it's going to get back to you on whether it's approved or not. If it has the grid icon with the red exclamation point, that means that you initiated the grid, but you haven't saved it yet, so it hasn't been saved. Now if it has the grid icon with the green check mark, that means that it's active. The grid has been created and it's been saved at least once. And then finally, you have the kind of the yield. Is that a yield sign? Or basically the exclamation point and then the green circle with the check mark inside. It's check for errors or completed. So that's what you're looking for after you click the approve button. You're wanting to know whether or not your items were approved, if there were any errors. If there are errors, you'll see check for errors. If not, you'll see the green circle with the check mark and it'll say completed. So do keep in mind, once your items have been approved, and there weren't any errors with your items at all, you won't be able to access them again through your grid. So if you needed to record those KSNs, you should do that before you click approve. You won't be able to go back to your grid. At the least, you could always take a screenshot so that that way you have them on record. So otherwise, you'll have to talk to your merchant maybe to get your KSNs, or you can always look through quick search as well. So for the grid type, that was one of the things that you could search with. You have your changes grid and return new item grid and return changes grid. We're going to talk about those more tomorrow in the IMA features session. So the N is for new items grid, so that's basically anything with new items that you're just processing through your task list. Okay, so let's go back to the grid history. So you'll see here that I have errors. So to re-access your grid, you click the grid button in the action column. And it's going to bring it back up. And depending on the field, there are some fields that will display in the default view, which is really nice and convenient. They will display here sometimes and maybe be highlighted in red. But a lot of fields don't do that. I don't really know what triggers certain fields to do that and what doesn't. So if your field that you're looking for is not here, then that means you have to locate it on either on the tab where it's located, or you can select all. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So to see your errors, you can click this View Errors in New Window, and it'll open up a separate window for you so you can see your errors. It looks like I have converted cube. That's the field, converted cube error. And then the message is saying the carton cube is less than the sum of the each's cube. Correct the each or carton dimensions to be accurate. And then if we go further down, you'll see some of these, instead of saying error in red, has the WAR, which is actually warning. There's just not enough space. If you see any warnings in that orange color, you can ignore those. You don't have to fix warnings. It's just kind of a heads up, but they're not anything that needs to be fixed, and it's not going to keep your item from being approved. Okay, so the only error we have is the converted cube error. So how would we find that if we don't know what tab it's on? If you look over on the left, you can see under Details, you can see the package each. So we know this is going to be on the Package tab. It also lets you know the affected KSNs and UPCs. So here's, whoops, highlighted a little funny. There's a KSN, there's a KSN. Here's, the UPCs are above the KSN. So that kind of gives you more information as far as exactly what items need to be corrected in case you have, let's say, different assortments on your grid. So let's go fix that error. So that was on the Package tab. So you can either click All, and it'll bring up all of your fields, or you can click Package. Before I do that, I'm really glad that this did this because I wanted to show you guys. You may be in your grid, and all of a sudden, your scrolling bar on the bottom that lets you go left to right seems to disappear. I know that happens a lot, and the help desk actually hears from a lot of people about that because they don't know how to scroll left or right anymore. So you'll see my scroll bar on the bottom disappeared. All you have to do is just scroll down, and there it is again. There we go. Now it's showing on your side. And that way you can move left to right. But if you do the All feature, then you have to actually go find that specific field. So if you know what tab it's on, it makes it a little bit easier to find. We know it's on the Package tab, so we're going to look on the Package tab. And we are looking for, here, dimensions, the depth, width, and height. So it said that there was a converted cube error. So we went over dimensions and weights some yesterday. But basically, the cube for the carton has to be at minimum the cube for all of the eaches together. So the cube for each is 60, and there's 6 eaches. So it has to make sense with the carton that you can actually fit all of those eaches into the carton. So that's why we're getting the error, because I have the same dimensions for the carton as I do for the eaches, which wouldn't work. So we're going to change this so that it's accurate. So now if we were to calculate it, the depth, width, and height of each of the eaches and all of their cube sums with 6 of them, it would be a total cube of 360. So I know that gets a little bit confusing. If you're having some trouble with your dimensions and weights, I can send you, actually if you go on the portal on the IMA training tab, on that left side where all those pieces of documentation, there's actually some specifically on dimensions and weights. So that whole document is just about dimensions and weights and explains it and how to update it. So you may find that useful. So once you correct whatever error there is, you can click Approve again. And you'll notice that I think about every 10 seconds or so, this page will automatically refresh itself. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint for a second. Okay. This should be clearing in just a few seconds. There we go. You see it's running. In the meantime, while that's running, do you have any more questions about new item grid setup? Anybody? So Yvonne is asking, so the carton height and weight can be the same as the each. It really depends on your carton that you're shipping things in. We want to know, we don't really care that much about the dimensions of the eaches. We care about the dimensions of the carton because we want to know how much space your product is. So that's what's important to us. We want the carton height and width and depth to be accurate to real life. So regardless of whether it can be the same height, it may be the same height, it may not be. It depends on the actual boxes you're using. We want the real life information. And as far as weight goes, the carton has to add up correctly for the weight. So if each weighs 1 pound and there's 6 of them, the carton has to weigh 6 pounds. So there's no variance allowed in the system for weight. So does that answer your question, Yvonne?
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay. You'll see here now on my grid history screen my item processed and it's completed. And like I had called out before, once your item's completed, you can't re-access your grid, so you can't get those KSNs. All right, so I'm going to be here. I'll stay on the line for the next 5 minutes or so in case you have any questions you didn't think of. If I wasn't able to answer any of your questions or if I missed any of them on the chat, please email vendoruniversity@searshca.com. I want to make sure you get the help that you need. And tomorrow we will be covering some IMA features, basically some of the different types of task lists that are there and the data catalog notifications, the changes grid. And then on Thursday we're going to cover maintenance in IMA and go over a lot of the typical maintenance that you might do on operational items. So have a great day, and I will stay on the line for a while in case you have any more questions.